as Shane said, my company is Moth Attack. I casually rode bikes as a child, didn't really know how to take care of them, so every time I got a flat on the dirt roads by the house, I'd have to wait for my dad to take care of them. So when I moved to Los Angeles from Las Vegas at 20 years old, I was really excited to move to a city where you could ride bikes. I didn't know that Los Angeles was not a city that people rode bikes at that time, because it definitely wasn't in 2004. Compared to Las Vegas, though, it was the most bike-friendly city in the world to me. I moved for a job with Urban Outfitters. I was doing retail display work, building out displays, painting, general carpentry. I kind of got the job on a whim after coming back from a long trip in Europe and took the opportunity to move to Los Angeles with it. Somehow that got me on a bike, and I was commuting from Hollywood to Westwood. If any of you know what that is like, Sunset, that whole stretch is deadly. I didn't know any of this. I sold my car, I thought it was a great idea. Worked for Urban Outfitters for about 3 years in Los Angeles and started to get kind of restless. It was kind of a cushy job, but still very corporate. I still had to answer to all sorts of, yahoos up and about, and wasn't really allowed the freedom that I had been used to as a kid, living at home, working in coffee shops, taking off to travel. I was doing a lot more activism before I had a real job, and that kind of killed a lot of things for me. So I took what I thought was going to be 2 weeks off, turned into me putting in my 2 weeks notice to ride from Seattle to San Francisco. Everyone thought I was insane for quitting a cushy job to do a 2-week-long bike ride, but I kind of had to do it. So 2 of my friends and I rode Seattle to San Francisco in just under 2 weeks. Amazing. It was probably the best thing that I could have ever done for myself at that point. It gave me time to realize that I wasn't really a good corporate fit. Never really been my thing to work for people that way. So I came home and was kind of lost. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I fell into bike messengering because anyone with a bike can do it. And Los Angeles, they will hire literally anyone. I did that for a time and found that being allowed to not only get paid to ride a bike was possibly the coolest thing in the world, but I was on my own time. As long as I did my work, they would give me more, and the faster I did my work, the happier I was, because the more I was riding, and the happier everyone was with me. So it was both the freedom to do work like it was my own, and the freedom to not have to worry about what you do as a business owner. So after a time as a messenger, I went to a frame building school because I decided that woodworking skills and painting would translate to metalwork very easily. Not totally off, fortunately. There's a couple schools. The school that I chose was in Rifle, Colorado. There is a man named Koichi Yamaguchi. He moved here from Japan in the 80s to work for the US Olympic team and the US national team. So he was building bikes, custom hand-built bikes for US Olympians under the name Huffy, which, if any of you know bikes, Huffy's not real reputable, but back then they paid people to make fancy bikes and not put their names on it, basically. So I picked him partially because he had a 3-person school, and partially because he had developed this frame building company in Japan with a couple friends of his that was the top notch of Japanese frame building and kind of the top notch of track bikes, which is kind of where my interest was. Messengers tend to use track bikes and fixed gear bikes. If you don't know what that is, a lot of times there's no brakes and it's only 1 gear and it's direct drive. So if you pedal forward, the bike goes forward, and if you pedal backward, the bike goes backward. Very simple, very easy to take care of in all sorts of weather. So I went through this frame building school, and it was 2 weeks, and kind of with the impression that I would be able to walk out of school and build another bike the next day. Kind of not the case, as I learned. I thought at that time that LA would be a great place to start something in a workshop, frame building company. Little did I know how expensive workspace is in this city at that time. So in the next couple of years, I basically talked to as many builders as I could, did any amount of work that I could on bikes. I volunteered with the Bicycle Kitchen in that time, which if you don't know, that is a community-run space in Los Angeles, currently at Fountain and Virgil, that will help anyone work on their bike or get them on a bike for any amount of donations. It's amazing, and it led to me eventually moving into a warehouse in what is called the Bicycle District, East Hollywood, Los Angeles, and we basically built a space to live and work around wanting to build bikes in Los Angeles, but not being able to afford the $3 square foot storefronts that are so common here, or the $3,000 a month rent in most places. So I tailored my life around building frames at home. So now we're in a space where I have a lofted workspace. It's probably the coolest space in Los Angeles. A few of us live there, a few of us have worked there. We had another frame builder for a little while, but he kind of gave it up and moved on. So it's down to me, and my partner does mechanic work out of there. So we've kind of got a little in-house operation. Dogs, it helps to have the dogs at home. It keeps me from going insane being alone all day. But so there, went through school, built out the workspace. Right now I'm doing there's a lot of handmade bike shows. Custom bikes have been kind of coming back with a vengeance through the last 4 or 5 years. Most of the bikes that everyone sees are designed by some guy in an office, and those plans are sent overseas to either China or Taiwan, and they're still handmade for the most part, but they are pumped out of factories and then shipped back into the States. The handmade kind of revolution, as it were, is really, really strong in North America. We've put a very high price on handmade and locally made in the bike community, which has been the reason that it survived, because our prices can't compare to what someone in Taiwan can do. The quality, hit and miss. You don't get to meet the person that builds your bikes, but a lot of times they're good at what they do. So we're in a process of, there's this show called the North American Handmade Bike Show, which I've now been a part of 2 years in a row, where it's about 200 builders get together in various parts of the country every year. This last year we were fortunate that it was Sacramento, so it was very close. And next year we'll be in Denver. And everyone brings their fanciest bikes. It's kind of a push in many different materials. Some guys come out with bamboo, some carbon, but it's all very rooted in steel, which is very traditional and a very highly evolved material at this point. All of our material kind of trickles down from aerospace, oddly enough. So it's stayed relevant all of these years, even though it's old and heavy to a lot of people. It's really, really amazing material. So I'll do the shows. It's hit and miss. Unfortunately, at this point, I have been the only woman there 2 years in a row, which is always a little interesting. I did take on an apprentice earlier this year, a woman, and it hasn't worked out, but I'm hoping that one day I will stop either having marriage proposals for someone's son, because that's happened, and the question, you're the only woman here, aren't you? Because that would possibly be my favorite day. I did have an interview with a bike magazine. They did these online interviews, and the guy closed the interview with, if you're a woman and you want a bike, you should talk to Megan Dean at Moth Attack. at the time, I had built a bike for one woman, and the rest of my customers were men. So he got a bit of an eye roll from me, and we fired back with a satirical video that we kind of went over the top with the sexism, and the interviewer and myself. It was very, very not well received at first because no one knew it was a joke. Everyone thought the interviewer was seriously being an asshole to me, which was not quite the case. A lot of the process that I go through is very, very organic, and it kind of depends on customers. Some customers come to me and they know exactly what they want out of a bike. They've tried dozens and dozens and dozens and nothing has worked. Some people have a bike that they love, it's their favorite thing in the world, but it's broken, it's the wrong material, something's happening. Sometimes people just want more bikes. I have an ever-growing endless collection. It's kind of you need a bike that does everything all the time. So I'll start kind of trying to feel people out, see what their experience is with bicycles. A lot of times people know what they want it to look like, but they don't understand how to get to that point. So it's kind of my process to walk people through that and direct them and corral them into understanding how to get to that point. Custom bikes falls into a lot of fit, aside from just the aesthetics of it. A lot of people don't know how to properly fit on a bike. Even in the bike industry, a lot of people don't know how to fit people properly on a bike. There's a lot of things that can factor in, injuries, flexibility. It's endless. So I'll go through a fit process with folks. It's full body measurements, all sorts of different injuries, different riding styles. If you want to race, it's a different bike than if you want to ride to work, ride to school, just ride to the coffee shop. I have a coffee shop bike, pretty much, you know? It's different than all the rest. But, so we'll go through the fit and the design process, and then I will take what is essentially just a pile of steel tubes and custom pick them. What I use is this tubing from a company called True Temper, which also does do like golf clubs, but that's the only company that is made in the US, and it is locally distributed. So I go to Redondo Beach and pick up my tubes, pick up most of my materials there. I very, very, very rarely am unfortunate in the case of having to go outside of things made in the US. It's not something everyone worries about because some people in the bike industry put a premium on different things like Japanese made, Italian made. Everyone's got their thing. So I pick up these tubes in Redondo Beach basically and start cutting them. I do everything by hand. Some people do a little bit more machine. I take hacksaws and files and fit the tubes together. There's a couple different processes of joining, particularly with steel. What I do is either fillet brazing, which is when you join the tubes together and they completely match up. It's a bronze filler that doesn't melt. You don't melt the metal like you would with welding. It melts the filler and it adheres basically to all of the metal that it touches. So it basically fills in the gaps and bonds it, which ends up being stronger than a lot of things. Welding is also something that a lot of people do. It's TIG welding. It's not what I do. That actually melts the metal. It's a little bit hotter process. Nothing really wrong with it. It's what factory-made bikes tend to be now. And then there's another process, which is this bike. And this is lugging. This is very traditional for steel. There are these pieces where each of the tubes join together that they're basically cuffs. So once the tubes are fit together, you basically slide these pieces in, and I use a jig, so it's all stationary, keep it straight. And you silver solder, basically, if you've ever done any sort of soldering, plumbing, it's the same exact concept. You melt the silver in, and it will join all of the pieces together. It's what's been done in steel frame buildings for a century, going on a century now, and it's basically just a slip joint. I brought this has already been brazed together, and then this is just fit in. So it's ready to go back in the jig, and the dropouts will be here. So it's very straightforward. But a lot of people have never seen the process, don't know how it comes, and I find that that's what is usually the most, I guess, intriguing and baffling to people, is that I literally do start with a pile of tubes, and it turns into a rideable bike within hopefully a reasonable amount of time. Sometimes endless options, it kind of gets a little bit tricky. So I'll go through that process. This is pretty much straight out of the jig, so I haven't done any extra work to it. I'll sand it down so that everything kind of matches. If I have to do any more filing, I'll do more filing. And then it goes off to painter, which I work with local painters to keep that as in-house as possible. I would love to actually be the person doing that, but the environmental regulations in California are incredibly strict, so it's not something I'm financially capable of doing at this point. So we'll see down the line where that ends up. As far as kinds of bikes, my experience comes in partially as a messenger, partially as a commuter, but I've raced bikes for 6 years now on a velodrome, which is a banked oval. And I don't know if any of you saw the Olympics at all this year, and track cycling was actually somewhat featured for once. It's been around for years. It's what track bikes and fixed gear bikes were mostly used for in competition. There's a variation of races. Most of them are very short though, and it's the fastest anyone basically will ever go on a bike. Some races are as short as 10 seconds for some guys because they're going 60 miles an hour. Little dangerous, really cool, very, very specific. It's kind of what we call around here the nerdy bike sport. A lot of my friends within track cycling are all rocket scientists. It's this phenomenon with JPL and track racing in Los Angeles. There's a lot of overlap for some reason. It kind of comes down to a numbers game. You don't always have to be the fastest person to win a lot of times, and a lot of what I get by, especially now running a business and having less training time, is smarts. You just kind of try and outwit the other people as often as you can. And hope that works out for you when your legs aren't quite there. And then I've also got a background now in ultra cycling, which is another kind of nerdy sport and also has a lot of engineers and rocket scientists involved in it. But that's anything over 100 miles at a time basically kind of becomes ultra distance. Most are 200 miles at a time, so people will ride 200 miles in a straight shot over usually a pre-described course, and that's somewhere between 9 and 16 hours depending on how many mountains and hills you put in the way. There's this kind of spectacular race that is my favorite and one of the only events I kind of go out of my way to do at this point, and it's called the Furnace Creek 508. It is a race that starts in Santa Clarita, just up here for those of you that know, and goes into Mojave, through Death Valley National Park, out of Death Valley National Park, and through Baker, where the thermometer is, and into 29 Palms Joshua Tree area, in a straight shot. You have a 48-hour time limit, so that's something that I kind of got into as a joke a little bit 7 years ago. We had a friend that raced it on his own. You have a crew, you have a support crew, and in our delirium as a support crew, we decided it would be really funny if we came out on our fixed gear bikes and raced fixed gears on this course that very few people had. Most people will use road bikes, they'll use time trial bikes, which puts you at an aerodynamic advantage. And I took my bike as a messenger from work to the race the same day. And we actually finished really well. People thought we weren't going to finish. They saw us, we showed up, a bunch of like goofy punk kids. We made a big deal out about being vegan, so we had this race totem, this Team Bonobo. I don't know if you know them. They're generally vegetarian and vegan. I almost just said chimpanzees, that's not right, apes. And very, very egalitarian society. So we thought it would be really funny to do this race as that. And we finished in the top like 15 or 20% of teams and realized that it was kind of a thing. So that's kind of been a recurring race for me since then. And I've actually started building bikes kind of specifically to do that for a couple people, which I never really thought would be the case. So there's a lot of directions that custom frame building goes and a lot of different reasons to do custom bikes. Personally, I think any reason tends to be a good reason for most people. I know people that have commissioned bikes as collectors. I've not really been my thing as of yet. I really, really want people to ride them. I think functional art is one of the coolest things that we can do as artists and, you know, makers of things. But a lot of times it does come down to fit. And as far as what we're going into personally in the future, I'm looking at just kind of pushing forward. I'm not currently working with anyone else, but I'm looking at maybe doing more of an apprentice sort of thing. Unfortunately, the woman that I did work with, she did move to Germany for school, so that kind of cut us out there. But it's kind of a one-woman shop for me at this point, and it has kind of given me a lot of free reign to do what I've done with my life outside of work. And really, it all came down to taking 2 weeks off to quit unintentionally to ride a bike for 1,000 miles. So, but if anyone has any questions after.